Kathy, it is our final episode of this season, and we are talking about one of my favorite topics on Drink Like a Lady today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a perfect day to talk about this.
Absolutely. I am just coming off of a extreme self-care weekend. I went to a yoga retreat, ostensibly to go and follow a yoga teacher that I used to follow when I lived in my old neighborhood. But the extreme amounts of meditation and yoga and just downtime and lack of options just made me come back with so much focus on my business that I really need to figure that in more. And I know we're going to be talking about that on today's episode.
Absolutely.
So it is episode 11, season 3 of Drink Like a Lady, which is designed to get you as a female leader a seat at the bar and a seat in the boardroom. And we have picked self-care as our final topic because you have a story about Arianna Huffington.
Yes. I've always been involved in women's leadership programs, and we invited her to come in to New York for women's FIT. It's the Fashion Institute of Technology. So she came in and she talked to us. And the first thing she talked about was that we as women put work, family, others, business, all of our other commitments before ourselves. And she was at the height of her career building up the Huffington Post, which then became the Huff Post. And she said, you must absolutely make daily choices, including sleep, socialization, physicality, all of that. And I walked away and I never forgot that. Not that I've done it every day since, but certainly it's been sitting in my mind that this is so important.
And because we play all those roles, right? Mother, wife, daughter, daughter-in-law, sister, boss, direct report.
Yeah.
If we don't show up having taken care of number one first, we really truly can't do justice to the other roles that we play in other people's lives. And so that simple paradigm shift is something that I think is interesting, because most people I know probably throw self-care on the back burner because that is what we've been conditioned to do.
And especially as servant leaders, what we do is we believe that we always have to be on. And recently I realized that this whole and I laughed when I put down 7 o'clock, because I don't know, we're going to talk about what to do at 7 o'clock in the morning and at night. But, finally a turn-off switch, especially with COVID, there was no turn-off switch because we needed that interaction with others.
So we're going to offer you our 3 steps if you are considering putting self-care back into your regimen as a leader. We're going to offer you some ways that you can do that. And it sounds like step number 1 is to really take inventory of your life and of your habits. And there's some breakdown here.
So it's you pull it out into 4 different areas. One being physical. Are you moving enough? And I know this is the one thing. Once I sit down in the morning, I think, oh, I'll get so much done. And then the moving part really becomes secondary to everything else. That is why I literally keep a pair of weights beside my desk. And when I go, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be moving, I do some weight exercises, even if I have a dress on or dress up. And then the feeding of the body. This is really, really important for us to really be very conscious of the food that we put in. There is where I have such great willpower that, sometimes I have to find, sometimes I don't even feed myself enough. So, but I'm very conscious of every nutrition that goes into my body. Emotional is second. What are we doing to manage our stress levels? We've talked about this in the past few episodes in terms of burnout, stress. How do we manage that as well? And one of the things is, are we forgiving ourselves? We were very good to forgive other people, but are we forgiving ourselves? Are we being kind to ourselves and others? Next is social. Are we socializing? That's important too, because we are human beings and we need to be social. That's how we're made up as well. And one of the things I do is I try to really stay focused on being with very positive people. And that's why I think our relationship has worked. We've looked for, even in the tough times, look for positivity. The last thing is spirituality. And it sounds like you had a lot of that this weekend too. Taking time alone, meditating, yoga, Pilates, nature, journaling, all of that. Those are the 4 areas of which you should take inventory.
It's interesting that you talk about forgiveness, because I am probably not very forgiving of a lot of people in my life. And in self-reflecting, I realized that I'm probably also not very forgiving of myself. So that was an interesting paradigm shift for me to make. But I kind of laughed at that when you said that about forgiveness. I was like, oh, I am not forgiving. All right. Step number 2 is to ask yourself, do I have balance? So really to look back at these 4 areas, physical, emotional, social, and spiritual, and ask yourself, do you maybe have too much or too little of one? And so you're out of whack.
And that's important because, when you're balanced, it's think about it as anything else being balanced, whether, it's a piece of wood, it's, your life, you feel better when everything is balanced. And so it's important, sometimes I know that, we tend to socialize here between my husband and I quite a bit. And then I go, okay, we're off on Sunday afternoon after 4:00. We've had enough. And it's not because we don't want to be with people, but it's actually because I need, and I know he does too, that time alone or time together.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now step 3 is really getting into the meat of our podcast today, episode 11 of Drink Like a Lady, which is if you are considering how you're going to exactly put self-care back into your regimen, here are some ideas. And number 1 is to turn off your phone. One of my members earlier this week, actually last week at a dinner, said she turns off her router in her house for 2 hours so she could do deep work, much to her husband's chagrin. But she's like, I need everything, all the notifications off. And the only way I'm going to do it is by getting the Wi-Fi cut off for 2 hours.
Wow. I love that. I mean, that really makes you stick to your guns in terms of having a cutoff period. I love it.
There was a collective gasp that went up at the dinner. They're like, oh,
yeah, I bet.
So you say that you're turning off your phone after 7 p.m. Why is 7 p.m. important?
I don't know. I just think that it's a time at which my cycle of my day ends. We've done all of our due diligence outside of the home. We're starting to cook dinner. It's time. We sit and have dinner together almost every night. And we do that with the phones not with us. So, if the phone rings, and we always say, if it's one of the kids, they'll find us. It'll be fine as well. But that is important. And then I went back to also not turning the phone on before 7. Giving you a full 12 hours. It doesn't mean I don't look at it once in a while if I'm up early, but certainly it gives you some boundaries under which to work.
And that dovetails nicely into the next one, which was don't bring your devices, phone included, into the bedroom and limit television.
And media is just, with everything going on, obviously with COVID, there was all these negative conversations in the news and the TV shows. There's a lot of, I find that my husband is drawn to suspense and, who's killed this one and, all of that. I'm not watching that kind of TV before I sleep. But it really does make a difference in your whole psyche once you start to limit it. And there have been nights we don't even put the TV on at all anymore.
And I'm going to invoke a little bit of science here, because those devices, whether it be your phone or TV, are actually activating a chemical in your brain, which is what gets you to wake up in the morning. And what you really need to be activating as you're trying to wind down is melatonin, which is why you have blue shades on like Kindles and things, right? Because what you don't want to do if you're reading right before you go to bed is to have your body start getting wound up and producing the chemical that wakes you up. The other thing is that I think that right before you go to bed and right when you wake up are some of the most powerful times for you to manifest things that you want. Your subconscious is working on that overnight. So rather than fill it with the documentary about Charles Manson, could you maybe fill it with, what it is that you want to have happen so your brain can work on it while you're sleeping?
And I think that's a great point, that this is all now coming out more scientifically proven. People used to think, there's no science behind it, but the whole wellness industry is growing dramatically, and all of these are best practices.
Yeah. Your brain goes into a state called theta waves. There's alpha, there's delta, and theta. And theta is that in-between time before you really go into a deep sleep. And that's really when you're able to kind of rewire your subconscious.
Right. It's important.
So the next one is don't answer emails during your rest period at night. Give yourself room to think and recover. I would love for you to say that to my partner who is riding to Paris at 3 in the morning because that's when they're up.
And I used to do that because I was working with a partnership over in Denmark. But what you need to do is, if that's the case, if you are shifting your whole day, and I'm talking about Eastern Standard Time right now, then you need to shift it so that you at least get 8 to 12 hours of what I call recovery periods as well, because we become mechanical. And in that mechanics, we make errors. And I know I've done it, sent the wrong email and forwarded something I should not have done as well. But really try to think about what the answer might be rather than thinking you need to be on all the time.
Technology is wonderful, but it also sort of leads us to believe that we have to be stimulated all of the time. So if self-care is going to be front and center, what do we do with our technology?
Well, and that's the whole point. The point is that what technology is supposed to have done is save us time. And what it has done is actually robbed us of our own personal time. So
Yeah.
that's something to think about when you're looking at your phone. And, sometimes like yesterday, I ran out to do an errand and I forgot my phone. And before a few months ago, I would get nervous and I was like, oh my God, I don't have my phone. It's okay. It's actually good. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And what did we do before that? We actually looked at maps and things.
That's right.
Schedule alone time. I'm a big fan of this. I remember being on vacation in Tulum with a group back in December. And there was a time where I just like pulled off from everybody and just went and sat at a cenote, which is like a spring, for 2 hours because I was like, this vacation is just exhausting me right now. I need some time alone to hear myself and think.
And it's important, really to create your own relationship with yourself. And that alone time allows you, almost like you say, to reflect on maybe what you need, what you enjoy. I mean, I was sitting here about 10 minutes prior to this. And one of the things we're going to talk about is, taking a look at the clouds in the sky. And in the office I could actually see the clouds going by. And I thought, oh, what a great way to preempt what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And there's times when there's just a solution to a problem that's eluding you and you just have to create space for that to bubble up. I'm a big fan of like the answers are all within you, but you have to create space for it to come up. And so if you're not doing that alone time, when in your very busy forced schedule are those answers ever going to have time and space to transpire?
And interestingly, this idea about decision making, we've had to make a lot more decisions daily during this whole COVID, and even personal decision. Do I wear a mask? When do I get vaccinated? Do I go out? All of this. And now we're getting out of that. And it's even, in my case, how do I open up facilities based on COVID, and what are the rules and what capacity and all of this? So that decision making also wears you down.
Yeah.
I mean, it really wears you down. So that time alone to reflect on all of that is so integral in terms of what we're calling self-care today.
Meditation is a tough one. I will tell you that it took me years to finally embrace it and get into it, but that monkey mind can trump it every single time. So why is meditation important in business? Steve Jobs, I remember, went off to India to learn how to meditate for 6 months, but he said that, to your earlier point about decisions, you make so many decisions all day long that you need this time.
Yeah. And what I tend to do sometimes, knowing I might have a busy day, is I tend to, before I even get out of bed, I tend to go into a meditative state because then, I'm very much about, once I'm up, I'm out and moving things, making things happen in the world. That's how my mind works. So the meditation piece allows us to bring a calmness in, and it allows us to actually go to a deeper level of thinking, a higher level of thinking, optimum. So it's important. The other thing is meditate right before you go to sleep as well. The quiet, the peace, and all of that.
And it builds your self-awareness muscle. When you feel like you're starting to lose it, or you feel like, anger is the natural response, maybe you'll pause before you let loose.
I think that's a good point. That's for sure.
Starting a compliments file for yourself. I love this one. I call it a brag book. But life is going to kick you down. Inevitably, it always does. But what can you, in that moment, or if you're going into an important meeting, have a book of your accomplishments that kind of gets the good juju flowing through your brain?
I tend to be a person that I don't sit here and take inventory of my accomplishments. I never have. It's like, okay, I've done this next, done this next. And when I read this years ago, I thought, what a great way, first of all, if you're interviewing for something, to have it ready for you. But also, there are days when people are just taking out all of their, let's say, anger, frustrations, whatever that may be, on you. Mm-hmm. And you kind of sit back and think, what am I doing? What have I done? And I find there are certain situations recently, people are very quick to complain. Mm-hmm. And I still have to be nice to them. But certainly I realize that I'm able to be professional and do it with style.
Someone said to me last week, I think it was my business mastermind, that we don't as women stop to really celebrate our wins. And the thing is that if we're not stopping to celebrate our wins and being happy in this moment and always being forward looking, then we're never going to really galvanize all that good energy for the future to transpire. So it's so important to celebrate what's already happened.
I agree with you. And being in the present moment, if you've been there and you can stay there, it's a very powerful moment.
The next tip is to take a walk in nature. I've actually heard this a couple of times. I think the first time I saw it was, Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn, I want to say, wrote a blog in Inc. magazine. And he said, how to be productive when you're stuck at home in this pandemic with kids and dogs and homeschooling and all this and that. And one of his things that he said was you got to build in 15-minute breaks. But one of those breaks should be just going and taking a walk in nature. It's not going and doing the dishes. Mm-hmm.
And that's why bird watching has become so important during this period of time. People who look at it out in their backyard, put up bird, houses, this and that. They have learned that the nature really brings us beauty. I'm reading a book I read all the time, as you know, The Universal Human by Gary Zukov, and it talks about the beauty of our world is right there out in front of us, and we really should be out there looking for it as well.
I love being barefoot in the grass and just really being close to the ground. There's something really energizing about that.
Absolutely.
You mentioned this earlier, but choosing someone positive to hang out with. I'm a big believer that you are the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. In fact, I'll go one step further and say you're also some of the 5 people they hang out with. So why are positive people an important way to pave the path to self-care?
Well, because what they'll do is if they see something in you that you may need and you trust them and you know that they're going to give you something of a positive communication about yourself, you can then bring it into yourself and look at it. And I know that I think I told you when I finally realized I hit a wall about a month ago, someone who I know cares for me said, "You've hit a wall." And the fact that this woman said it to me and was so positive in the way she said it allowed me to look at myself and become really self-aware at the time. And once again, go into a different mode of operations.
Feedback is such a gift, and so rarely do people actually give it. And when they do, I think of it as a gift, good or bad. Yeah. And the last one is asking for help when you need it and when you want it.
So I love this story. I put together a women's group. It was Under the Stars. And because a lot of women haven't been together, we met over at a pool and we had bartenders, 3 guys came and did bartender and open bar. It was really fun. And as they introduced themselves and they talked, there's 2 things, but this is the last one. They talked about, what would they be if they were not a human? But as they left, I asked each woman to ask for something they either want or needed. And it was lovely because each woman did. And then what I saw was them interacting with each other afterwards, saying, "I can do this," or, oh yeah, I'd love to, you're a tennis pro and you'd love to teach. I'd love to learn tennis. And it was wonderful to connect through the opportunity to talk about wants and needs. And it was great.
I end each of my peer mentoring calls by asking, who do you need to be connected to? Because that to me is a very pointed way for people to ask for help.
Exactly. That's perfect. Yeah.
All right. We are rounding up season 3. Any reflections as we look back on this season, which was really to look at the opportunities that the pandemic presented?
Yeah, I think it was a very important season because we now are going back into a world that we thought would be the same when we left, but it's not. And
Yeah.
that's what we're going to be talking about, going, what are some of the new trends and how is that going to impact us? And how do you go back in and feel really good about how you're going to navigate the new trends in business and your personal life?
All right. Well, we're heading into a holiday weekend.
Yeah,
So rest, reflection, and reverence for yourself is what I think you said this weekend should be about in light of what we just talked about.
exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Joya. It's always a pleasure.
I love it. And if anyone wants to work with you or get in touch with you, how do they get a hold of you?
They can call me directly at 609-933-7600 or my email, which is posted, stewartkathy@gmail.com.
And I am currently filling for my next public speaking masterclass, which is designed for women in corporate that are transitioning. Maybe you've got a promotion, maybe you've got a whole new team, and you just need to be able to command that room. And I'm going to teach you how to do it. And the start date for that next masterclass is September 29th. And we are enrolling now, Kathy. So if you know anyone, send them my way.
I will definitely do that.
All right. You have a good holiday. We'll see you soon.
Yep, you too. Take care.